Advances in aviation history give way to legendary aircraft that become the most powerful and innovative weapons of our time. Each airframe is unique, with limitless capabilities. But one thing remains the same. Underneath the surface, they are all simply great planes.
In September 1944, Allied forces in Europe start flying a light, fast new bomber, the twin-engine A-26, armed with 2 tons of bombs. The manufacturer, Douglas, christens it the Invader. I'm Paul Max Moga, and we're here at the Fighter Factory in Suffolk, Virginia. Join me as we tell the lifelong story of the A-26 Invader. "25 years after the war, Invaders still see combat, with their final missions in Vietnam in November 1969. No other American combat aircraft matches this longevity. As late as 1961, Invaders fly in the air forces of 21 nations.
Don Anklin, chief mechanic and test pilot for the Fighter Factory, is very knowledgeable about the A-26.
How about this particular A-26 that we have behind us? Just give me the lowdown about where you guys got it from, how long you've had it.
Well, we heard about this back in the late 90s, that it was down in Texas and just sitting there rotting. And so we tracked the owner down, who happened to be in Oklahoma. And it had a little ground loop accident. One of the landing gear folded up on it. And it had been sitting in this dirt strip down there in Texas for a long time. The guy flew it over there to try to fix it for the owner. And they got in a little dispute, so it sat there, and it had been there for almost 9 years, and we finally acquired it, and went down there. We're thinking a little bit ahead of ourselves to fly it out of there, and we decided we'd put it on a truck. So we put it on a truck.
Cooler heads prevailed.
Yeah, so we put it on a truck and took it apart, put it on a truck, and brought it up here. And
how long do you think it'll be until she gets back up?
Well, if we can get a couple mechanics to work on it, we're probably 6 months from flying.
Douglas Aircraft Company designed and built the A-26 as an attack-type aircraft, but with the features of an American light bomber. When the Air Force abandons the classification of attack aircraft, the A-26 temporarily becomes the B-26. During the Bay of Pigs, Castro's forces and the CIA-backed exiles both fly them. The French use them in Dien Bien Phu and Algeria. They operate in the Congo, in Biafra, in Korea, and in more wars than any other aircraft type. When the original aircraft begin to show signs of wear and tear, the United States Air Force completely rebuilds 41 of their airframes. The A-26 makes its mark in the record books for close ground support and counterinsurgency air operations. The history of aerial bombing begins when unarmed World War I scout planes start carrying guns and grenades. Aerial bombs follow months later. In the meantime, aircraft design divides into specialized fighters and bombers. Early bombing runs are hit or miss. Designers struggle with how to drop the bomb out of the cockpit without hitting the plane. By war's end, enthusiastic air combat planners on both sides see a future dominated by air power and plan to build large, long-range bombers. Army planners have a different view. The traditional method of occupying territory, backed by ground attack support aircraft. To an extent, both camps have it right. Towards the end of the Second World War, aircraft get more specialized. Bombers, large and small, serve either tactical or strategic roles. Fighters, attack planes, and light bombers divvy up the ground attack work. This division of labor eventually makes attack planes irrelevant, and the Air Force drops the designation. In terms of size and capability, the A-26 most closely resembles the light bombers, the North American B-25 and the Martin B-26 Marauder. The B-25 Mitchell, the earliest and most conservative of the three, flies slower and carries the lightest bomb load. But pilots love the way it handles. Both the B-25 and the B-26 Marauder are pre-war designs, based on theories of what war would be like rather than on actual combat. The Marauder reflects Martin Aircraft's concept of light and fast bombers. With a plane that could top 300 miles an hour and evade enemies, Martin hopes the Marauder won't need an escort. But actual combat demands planes with more equipment, which means heavier weight and slower speeds. The Mitchells and the Marauders overshadow similar attack planes. The Douglas Company's A-20 Havoc, designed by Jack Northrop and first bought by the French, performs reasonably well in both Europe and the Pacific. Douglas turns out several thousand for most of the Allied air forces. The A-20, faster than both the B-25 and the B-26, has a shorter range and carries a smaller payload. But the British, who called the A-20 the Boston, prefer it, flying raids over Europe, as did the Free French forces. Despite its small payload, the attack bomber's low-level accuracy makes it the plane of choice over the random carpet bombing of the high strategic flyers.
In the lead up to D-Day, low-level A-20s skim across the channel towards their targets. First flown in 1938, the Havoc reflects pre-war theory about air warfare. It bristles with 6 defensive machine guns and a small bomb load for a relatively limited range. But it's also the first American combat airplane with a tricycle landing gear.
Along the way, the A-20's adaptable design gets extensively reworked into a series of very useful aircraft. In the early 1940s, the Douglas engineers, led by Edward Heinemann, designed a replacement for the Havoc, not based on the current plane. Instead, they draw from pre-war theory and real combat experience to formulate their design. The resulting A-26 immediately renders all other Allied light bombers obsolete, changing the course of aviation history. The letter immediately to the left of the dash and number designation indicates the basic mission purpose of that aircraft. A-26 stands for ground attack. B-26 stands for bomber. Douglas's new dual-design A-26 Invader changes the course of aviation history in 1941. Even with a 3,000-pound bomb load, Douglas's new attack plane zooms over 350 miles per hour, beating the Mitchells and the Marauders by more than 70 miles per hour. the Invader is one of the very few designs begun, approved, produced, and flown during the war. Only peace held it back. At war's end, only 2,453 Invaders have rolled off the assembly line, compared to over 10,000 Mitchells. The design team builds 3 prototypes on one airframe, differing mainly in the nose. The night fighter A-26A doesn't make the cut. The A-26B has a solid nose with 6 machine guns in it, while the A-26C has a glass nose for a bombardier. The first flight takes place on the 10th of July, 1942. The plane gets accepted with very few modifications. Even with a few bugs, the Invaders rush into combat. The crews appreciate their maneuverability and speed. Although the position of the engines provides less visibility than the A-20, it's acceptable. The new bomber first sees action with the 5th Air Force in the South Pacific Theater on June 23, 1944. The 416th Bomb Group is the first to fully convert to the A-26 in Europe, seeing combat on November 17th. Braving lousy weather over Europe that day, the group is the only 9th Air Force unit to complete its mission. In the European theater, Invaders fly more than 11,000 sorties in the remaining 6 months of the war. Along with other attack and tactical bombing aircraft, they support the invading armies and help liberate the continent. Bombing behind the enemy lines cripples the German combat unit's ability to organize and concentrate. Tanks, which should rush to the battlefield, have to detour around smashed bridges under constant aerial harassment. Not only do the Allies inflict heavy losses, but German troops arrive in combat already exhausted and with no guarantee they'd receive enough fuel and ammunition to keep fighting. The destruction to their supply lines cripples their effectiveness. By February 1945, over 9,000 aircraft attacked the German transport system. Meanwhile, their strategic bombing forces pound the German fuel and aviation industries. The concentrated attack on German infrastructure brings results. The Invader's defensive armament consists of 2 remote-controlled twin-gun turrets, one above and one below the fuselage.
Kind of run me through the gamut of what the A-26 had on.
Well, for defense, it had turrets in the back, and they were. We had one operator, and he kind of looked through a periscope that could direct periscope type of a gun sight. And he sat back there on a little seat and moved the thing all around, and he could look up or down and see where everything was and fire both guns at the same time, or he could fire just the upper or the lower.
Oh, so they got 2 up top and 2 on the bottom?
Yeah, and he's got a turret on top, and there's no glass around it, and it's kind of, they took that technology and put it in the B-29. So it's a gun sight type of a periscope type, and they stole it from a submarine, basically.
And could those things, were they only, backwards firing, or could they swivel 360?
360 degrees, all the way around.
Is that right back there? That's where the turret went?
Yeah, there's a turret that goes back just as the fuselage goes curved up. There's another turret that goes there, and it's identical to the one that's on top.
The planes can also carry several machine guns in packs under the wings. With 4 of the twin-gun packs, the Invader can strafe with 18 blasting guns.
For ground strafing, the airplane was a very good ground strafing airplane. You could take those 2 guns, spin them completely around, and the pilot could fire them along with the 8 guns that he has in his nose. Our version has 8 guns. There's also some that had 6 guns. So, you know, that's an awful lot of 50 cals. And if that wasn't enough, they designed gun pods that go underneath the wings, and you could have 2 guns in each pod, and you could have 4 pods.
2, 4, so that's like almost 20, 50 cals just unleashing holy terror on somebody on the ground.
Yeah, it could do a pretty good job on a tank or, you know, any kind of ground support.
The crews discover that after releasing their ordnance, the bombers actually fly like fighters. At some altitudes, the A-26 would actually turn inside a Messerschmitt Me-109. The Invader is actually faster than the Me-109E and only a few miles per hour slower than the F and G models.
By the time the A-26s enter the conflict, the German air effort is in decline. Pilot training delays the Invader's entry into combat. The plane itself suffers from weak and collapsing nose gear, a difficult cockpit hatch, and a complicated cockpit layout. All problems that will have to be resolved while the aircraft is still in active combat. The average unit cost of an A-26 Invader in 1944 was $192,457. While the A-26 proves a worthy opponent against the German Messerschmitt Me-109s, the airframe design suffers from personnel training issues, a weak and collapsing nose gear, and a complicated cockpit layout. These faults get fixed as quickly as possible for combat deployment. Though fuel shortages and the destruction of their aircraft production facilities hamstring the German air effort, their anti-aircraft barrages continue. During their short European deployment, 67 A-26s are lost, but they chalk up 7 confirmed air-to-air kills. Missions against heavily defended targets account for most of the Invader's combat losses. Pratt & Whitney 2,000 horsepower R2800 engines power the first Invaders. Later, water injection provides an even bigger boost, pushing the top speed of the aircraft from 355 miles per hour to 373. About half of the Invaders had this upgraded power plant.
So, how many horsepower did each engine have?
Well, they started out with 2,000 horse, and then they later on could water inject them, and you got them up to 2,200. And then later on in life, they put a little alcohol in them and a different water injection pump, and then
24 for more horsepower.
2,400. So that's what they were pulling out of them.
How much would one of these weigh if it was kind of a typical combat configuration? You know, got fuel, got bombs.
Yeah, somewhere around between 26 and 32,000, somewhere in that neck of the woods.
Yeah, and they could still turn inside of a Messerschmitt, from what I hear.
Yeah.
It's an impressive. That's an impressive feat for a bomber.
Yeah.
Their experience in Europe serves them well during the post-war Air Force inventory. Statistical analysis of U.S. light bombers in Europe seems to prove the A-26's superiority. But then again, the A-26 flew only as German fighter defenses crumbled. So fewer A-26 losses per 1,000 sorties might be skewed. But indisputably, Invaders dropped more tonnage per mission than the A-20, the B-25, and the B-26. In size, the A-26 fits right between the Mitchell and Marauder light bombers. with a wingspan of 70 feet, a length of 50 feet, and an empty weight of around 22,000 pounds. The Invader can carry a 4,000-pound bomb load up to 1,400 miles and has a maximum takeoff weight of 37,000 pounds.
So this thing could actually throw in a fairly decent bomb load and then on the way home do some good work on the ground because the thing could haul the mail.
They could do some real damage. I
Yeah.
mean, an airplane is fast. I mean, it could keep up with a P-51 Mustang. Doing that.
I've actually seen that. I've seen a two-ship of these things just tearing it up in the sky.
Yeah.
And they're big, but man, they can move.
They are. They're real agile, and it's a real pleasure to fly the airplane. It really is.
How about real quick? What about the air-to-ground ordnance? About the bomb load?
The bomb load, it had two great big long bomb bay doors, and you could put as, from recollection, I'm a firefighter in one of these things, so we used to put 1,200 to 1,300 gallons of borate in them. So they could haul somewhere around 2,500 pounds of bombs in different variances of degrees, and they could be salvoed all at once, or a few here and a few there. This airplane was one of the first bombers that they set up for rockets.
A few have radar and a black paint job for night bombing. The French re-equipped some as night fighters, but in the European theater, A-26s serve as light attack bombers. In the Pacific, ground troops depend on the close support of their powerful gunnery, though they also use them as heavily armored bombing platforms. At war's end, the Air Force cancels almost all production contracts, including orders for another 5,254 Invaders. But after assessing future needs, the Air Force decides to make the A-26 their standard light attack bomber. The plane's wing design, given a new low-drag laminar flow airfoil, contributes to its success. Chord-wise stiffeners strengthen the wings so they can carry an abundance of stores that round off the Invader's operational force. Its square shape makes it almost unique, but unlike the cylindrical monocoque form, the Invader's structure relies on material rather than shape.
Pretty much the same design as a North American Mustang, P-51 Mustang.
And we all know the good work that thing did.
Yeah, so.
You know, it sounds like this plane was built for a fairly specific purpose, being a dual-role, fast, maneuverable, light to / medium bomber.
Exactly.
And what ended up happening was it just became great at so many different things.
Sure.
After the war, efforts are made to turn the A-26 into a 3-engine aircraft by installing a jet engine in the fuselage.
I heard a rumor once that they tried to turn the A-26 into a 3-engine plane with a jet in addition to the 2 props. Yeah. Have you ever?
I've seen some pictures of it. I've seen some pictures of it in a book. I mean, somebody said they put like a J-47 in the tail of this thing and tried to see if they could get it off the ground quicker, but I don't know.
Begs the question, why?
Yeah, haven't figured that out.
In June of 1946, a prototype reaches 413 miles an hour. The prototype is the only Invader sample built after VJ Day. The Air Force keeps the Invaders as a stopgap measure until they develop jet-powered bombers. But then, the Korean conflict begins. Despite the proximity of major jet-capable airfields in Japan, the war in Korea is essentially one of short distances and intense battlefields. That suits the Invaders just fine, which could operate from rough strips or fly from Japan with fuel to spare. They assert air strength against the overpowering communist ground forces.
So they wanted the Invader to be a fast, maneuverable, multi-role, light to medium bomber. Let's talk about the fast portion. What kind of airspeeds did the Invaders typically operate at?
Well, they were always over 200 knots and somewhere between 200 and 250 knots. That was They're,
How about when you just got the throttles firewalled?
she'd go up in the mid 300s.
That's
Yeah,
that's
she'd
pretty
go.
fast for a big plane.
Yeah, you know, and it'll move. I mean, the airplane will get up and go.
As bridges go down and the UN forces pull out, the A-26s contain the attackers with bomb runs and machine gun fire. By now, they're called the B-26, filling the role of the Marauders they replace. The Air Force had discontinued the attack classification and wanted to change the name as little as possible. It's still considered a plane whose days are numbered, but right now, the Invader fills a niche no other plane can fill. In Korea, they prove it over and over.
Don, tell me a little bit about the A-26's role in Korea and Vietnam. Was it similar to what it served in World War II?
In the Korean War, it was used more as a short-range bomber for small specific things that they could get into and get out of because it was so maneuverable for ground support.
Even so, Korea is the last major campaign where they operate as medium bombers. Invaders carry out the last U.S. Air Force bombing mission of the conflict, 24 minutes before the ceasefire is signed on June 27, 1953. Korea changes world politics and warfare. China and the Soviet Union no longer act directly in combat, preferring to support other regimes indirectly with arms and cash. The Cold War is now played out across numerous localized battlefields. Once again, a new role for the A-26 is about to emerge. After Korea, the A-26 finds a new operational home fighting revolutionary forces in the Third World. In the near vacuum of outside support, revolutionary groups, particularly in South America, wage wars of attrition. The A-26, with its low-level speed and powerful, accurate armament, is recognized as an ideal counterinsurgency tool. Many of the revolutionaries in these campaigns are not communists, but nationalists, poorly equipped and desperate for outside help. While conventional military equipment proves useless against guerrilla warfare, the invaders provide an advantage. Their long-range and slow-speed capability allows for close observation. Their armor is impervious to all but the luckiest riflemen. A single invader can identify small-scale guerrilla activity and easily take it out. Without any modifications, the A-26 has the offensive power, speed, and range for the job.
Yeah.
They would come right down the train track and just start at the very back of the engine and just rake it to
And you know, from what I recall, that's normally a mission that was reserved for the fighters because you can't take a big, fat, slow bomber and strafe a train. Well, you can try it once, but then you ain't gonna be coming home.
The B-26 Invader next sees action on November 4th, 1950, in the First Indochina War. Alarmed by the spread of communism, the U.S. lends 120 of its precious invaders to the French in Indochina. Invaders go on to support the Legionnaires throughout the doomed occupation of Dien Bien Phu, which falls in 1954. Perhaps most importantly, the French used the invaders to defeat the Viet Minh forces at Vinh Yên. With his frontline formation shattered by bombing and napalm raids, the North Vietnamese General Vo Nguyen Giep avoids any future set-piece battlefield. The United States and the Douglas Invader continue in Vietnam long after the exasperated and defeated French depart.
And it was so effective in that particular conflict that they brought it back for the Vietnam War, because they really didn't have anything except for the little Tweety birds, you know, that they were trying to get up and running, the A-37s. So they brought
talk
these.
about indecision. You know,
Yeah.
they'd use it, they would do a great job, they'd put it in mothballs and then kind of get close to permanently decommission it. Then they say, oh, wait a minute, we got something that we need a plane for, and guess what? The Invader would be perfect for it. So then they bring it back.
Exactly, yeah, you know, and they say, oh, we need this and that, and you know, it's kind of got the similar type of a role as the old Sky Raider.
Back in 1951, the Vietnamese have no air force, so the French created one. But when the French retreat, so go the best pilots and aircraft. They leave the Vietnamese Air Force with 28 nearly unserviceable Grumman Bearcats and an assortment of non-combat planes. On the 12th of February, 1955, the United States takes over the Vietnamese Air Force and its training. When armed conflict resumes in 1959, the United States helps the Vietnamese Air Force. America transfers its counterinsurgency units to South Vietnam in 1961. Because the U.S. isn't officially involved in the war, these aircraft fly with Vietnamese Air Force markings, officially there for training local air crews. By having at least one Vietnamese personnel on each plane, the U.S. artificially maintains its embargo on American combat involvement. In theory, only a Vietnamese observer could authorize and direct an attack. In truth, even by December 1961, several attack missions have been flown with no observer in sight. The B-26 aircraft begins to fall apart under the strain. In August 1963 and February 1964, wings fall off invaders in combat and training. The rest are grounded. Is this the last hurrah for the A-26? A-26 Invaders were used as water bombers, carrying chemical retardants to battle forest and wildfires. "20 years of combat flying have taken their toll on the A-26 airframes. In 1964, the On-Mark Engineering Company rebuilds the airframes into virtually new planes called the B-26K. They're still Invaders, but with extensive modifications, including the loss of the fuselage turrets.
Oh, and On-Mark did a mod to them. They called it a ring spar, but they still had issues with the spar. And it was basically because the airplane was so easy to maneuver, they would outmaneuver the G envelope on the airplane and have some problems. And,
I mean, unless you got a limiter, which none of these planes did.
No.
You know, if you're in the cockpit and you're the pilot and you got to turn, guess what?
Yeah.
You're going to pull back until you're turning the way you want to turn.
And I want to make it happen. And
but she did it, though.
yeah, and she did. I mean, it always pretty much responded like you wanted it to.
Yeah.
And you know, I've heard guys that talk about the things. You know, they could hear the spar snap because it's right behind them, and then they fly the airplane home.
On mark reinforces the wings. They enlarge the tail and replace the engines. The K has 8 underwing hardpoints and can carry a powerful assortment of weaponry. On Mark produces 40 of these highly modified Invaders. Now, only a diplomatic glitch prevents the deployment of the B-26K. The Thai government refuses to have bombers stationed at its airfields for use against its neighbors. To accommodate their hosts, the U.S. Air Force redesignates the B-26K the A-26A. An attack plane is not a bomber, or so the story goes. The planes that land in Hawaii en route to the Indo-Chinese jungles are once again A-26As. Whatever their designation, they're Douglas Invaders. Ex-Navy Sky Raiders temporarily take over operations until the rebuilt A-26As rejoin combat in June of 1966. Operating from the Nakhon Phanom Air Force Base in Thailand, the Invaders fly trail interdiction missions against the Vietnamese guerrilla supply lines. By day and night, planes flush out targets among the maze of jungle tracks. The 606th and 609th Air Commando Squadrons fly these planes. Even the excellent B-57s, which had replaced them as light bombers, lacked the Invaders' ability to loiter at low speed, waiting for a target. Operating over Laos, Cambodia, and both parts of Vietnam, the Invaders hit everything from troops to supply areas. They specialize in truck busting on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Under the call sign Nimrod, they dodge through the mountainous terrain to attack North Vietnamese road traffic. They are very effective, as they had been in Germany and Korea. The B-26Ks make full use of their upgraded engines and extended fuel storage, including permanently fixed wingtip tanks. These rebuilt planes can deliver over 6,000 pounds of napalm, high explosive bombs, and fragment clusters. The machine guns carry 1,600 rounds apiece. The Invaders' counterinsurgency methods become a model for future anti-guerrilla air warfare, especially by night.
You know, the convoys in Korea moved during the moved at night.
Yeah.
They carried that same thing on into the Vietnam War. So these guys would go out at night with their bellies painted black, and they'd hear them up there, but
can't see them.
wait for somebody to light a cigarette, and down they came.
In those days, you can't see it, you can't shoot it.
That's right.
That's why everybody did it at night.
There's a part of this war that's known to only a few. I'm talking about the night interdiction war. This war is being fought at night in some of the most rugged, mountainous terrain any place in the world. The terrain, and the weather, and the night create an environment that is special and requires a special type of aircraft and a crew to be able to function in that environment.
A-26s flown by CIA mercenary pilots are used against Simba rebels in the Congo in 1965. They are flown by the Portuguese Air Force in Portuguese Angola the same year. And they see combat in the Nigerian Civil War during 1967.
The candlestick mission is merely the lighting of a target for strike aircraft. Although it is usually true that the strike aircraft carry their own flares, it's very difficult for the pilot to compute wind, locate the target, and also keep his eye on the surrounding terrain. This is the purpose for the candle, which is the mission of the C-123 section.
There are probably three basic reasons why the A-26 is used for our night missions against enemy supply vehicles. The first reason is that the aircraft can carry a pretty respectable load of ordnance. The second reason is A-26 can remain in the target area for an effective period of time, which is something that jets don't generally do as a rule. And the third reason is this old bird is real rugged and can take an awful lot of damage and still make it back home safely.
Invaders continue operations in Vietnam until late 1969. By then, spare parts grow scarce and attrition reduces their numbers. The squadron stands down, and the remaining planes go back to the United States. Considered not even worth mothballing, they get stripped and scrapped.
You know, from what it sounds, the total package that this plane was, we could have used 50,000 of them for crying out loud.
Yeah.
But there weren't really that many built compared to the other more popular, well-known bombers, you know, the B-24s, B-25s. But compared to the capabilities that this plane brought to 3 wars,
Yeah.
it seemingly had a relatively low number built.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like we could have used a whole lot more from them than we ended up getting.
Rumors about the Air Commando's Invader missions still circulate. Perhaps someday, the files will be opened and the old stories will be substantiated. Until then, the final days of the A-26 remain the stuff of speculation. All that remains of the A-26 is its legacy of service, the innovative techniques it perfected, and the affection of its crews. Douglas built relatively few Invaders. The planes were not widely recognized, but they worked until the wings fell off. Several times they were almost permanently decommissioned, but each time they were recalled because nothing else could do their job. Even at the close of their career, it wasn't that the A-26 grew obsolete, it's just that there were none left to fly. Very few military aircraft have worked so hard and served so long. The Douglas Invader deserves its reputation.